So I just wanted to kind of introduce Omar, who is the CEO of Urban Unit, but he's also a LUMS alumnus. Omar did his MBA from LUMS in 1992. He's probably one of the most educated bureaucrats. Omar became he joined the Pakistan Administrative Service and held all sorts of important jobs in the bureaucracy. But then he did an MA in Governance and Development from IDS Sussex. He did an MPP from Princeton. And then he did a PhD in Urban Policy from MIT. And he then came back, and he didn't go back to standard bureaucratic jobs, but chose to be in the Urban Unit. I've also been affiliated with the Urban Unit, so I know that we wanted somebody of the caliber of Omar to take that mission forward. And Urban Unit is a capacity in government that has come together, and while it's faced a lot of institutional challenges, it has continued to do quite amazing work given the constraints that it's faced. So with one of the things Omar's been very keen on is actually to strengthen linkages with academia. One of the strengths of Urban Unit, of course, is that being part of government, it puts together a lot of data. A lot of that data is used internally, but the value of what can come out of that data is much more than Urban Unit has the capacity to process. So the purpose of this sort of discussion today, or presentation and a meeting, was really to further this conversation about how linkages can be strengthened. But Omar proposed that we do this by focusing on one thing that they've put together, which is a revenue boundaries dashboard. So that's just to give you an insight of the type of data that they can put together. So I'm going to hand it over to Omar, who's going to actually present the revenue boundaries dashboard, but perhaps Aruj and Omar, you could also talk about other potential data sources that are there that could be leveraged.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. There's a mic. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's always a pleasure to be at LUMS, either as a student or as a former research associate or as a presenter. So what Ali said, I would simply continue from what he said. The idea was to use the revenue boundaries dashboard presentation more as a point of departure rather than as a point of destination. And the point of departure is that, within government you have institutions or agencies like the Urban Unit, which are doing all type of work. But somehow, we complete something and then that is shelved, and then nobody remembers about it, and 5 or 7 years later somebody is reinventing the wheel, either within the government or outside the government. And sometimes I feel that we keep on moving in circles. So one is the urgency of the fact that because we do not share information, we do not share what we do, what we are doing, one of the reasons is that we are unable to cross-pollinate. So if you have an agriculture background, you would know that cross-pollination is really essential if you want any crop to actually flourish. This idea of cross-pollination is only either if the Urban Unit comes over here at LUMS or at SERP or any other convergence points that you have in the city of Lahore or outside the city of Lahore, or if you are more than welcome at the Urban Unit and it's an open door. As long as I'm there, it's always an open door to ask us what we are doing or what we can do. The idea is to not have this as a one-off conversation. The idea is to have a series of conversations, perhaps longer or shorter, and how would we actually go about structuring it. Coming to the presentation today, I sort of attempted this presentation a month back, and it went pretty well. because the audience did not know much about it. So, that's why some things, just go very well. Yes. But now, because I've been introduced to the faculty at LUMS and people who are interested, I hope to solicit sort of a much more pointed feedback and have a much more, in-depth discussion about the product itself, and what can be the future directions for collaboration, for data sharing. Data sharing is a very important area. I think unless we do not share data or analyze it, we'll not be able to progress in the realm of policy making. And this I speak from my own government experience. So the structure of the presentation is that initially I'll be going over the history of how this revenue dashboard or this idea came along. Certain slides of the presentation I will hand over to Aruj, because she knows how the whole thing was put together. Technically speaking, I'm not a GIS person, although I've done this presentation several times and I can sort of manage it, but I would ask Aruj to do that part. And then we will move into potential applications, or what we have been sort of experimenting with the dashboard since it was officially launched within the government of Punjab in June this year. And I feel that while there is a lot of applications within the government of Punjab, I feel that there would be greater application of mind and ideas outside the government of Punjab. So with this, I have to run this thing also with me. So if the folks are not aware of it, we have ownership registers, and these registers have one element which is known as a revenue map, which is in layman's term is also known as a Musavi. No digital system exists from where information regarding a Mouza boundary. So a Mouza is basically a collection of villages. It is the smallest administrative and revenue boundary that you can have in Pakistan at the moment. Beyond a Mouza, there is no other boundary other than a village or a settlement. And that too is not an official boundary. So the Mouza is the last official boundary, and it will in a rural area comprise a village or a number of villages, but not more than 3 or 4 villages in a Mouza at a time. The revenue boundaries dashboard is a Musavi's data bank that will evolve and improve over time. So essentially what we have done is, to put it very, very simply, I mean, I think I would not even need the rest of the presentation. We have simply mapped the Mouza boundaries, which were previously, as the slides will show, which were previously in form of a Latha map. So the Patwari or the land revenue official carries a map, which is a cloth map or a Latha map, and that Mouza is basically mapped over that Latha. And there is no attempt, or there had been no attempt at digitization of that boundary. So you have the district boundary, which is digitized, you have the tehsil boundary, which is digitized, the provincial boundary we obviously know are digitized, but the boundaries of villages have not been digitized. So just to give you an example, this is a satellite image, and the boundary of a Mouza you can actually see in yellow over there. So right in the center, that is the village settlement, and this is a Mouza with one village, and that is the Mouza boundary. In some cases, you have a Mouza boundary in which there are no villages. So exceptional cases are always there. Going very, very simply. And this is a pictorial history of how this thing came about. I would speak a bit more about it. There was no official PC1 or a project document for this. Never was a project floated to have a digital Mouza boundary dashboard. It came out of the exhaust of work which the urban unit was doing. So initially the urban unit in 2010 or 11 was engaged for flood mapping. And when you are doing flood mapping, obviously you are seeing the extent of floods in different villages. And through that, they started mapping the Mouza boundary of those villages digitally. And from that point in time, it became sort of a continuous process within the urban unit, number one, and with the Board of Revenue. So if credit goes over here, it goes to a number of Board of Revenue officials, field officials, successors of Aruj and successors of the Chief Executive Officer of the urban unit, who kept this thing going on. So it was never financed in any fashion. It was never a project or anything. And it took about a decade to map out of 25,000 Mouzas. How many Mouzas have we mapped? We have mapped 22,000 Mouzas. So our score is above 80%. We are now something like 85, 86%, which is really not bad. 25,000 in Punjab. 25,000 in Punjab. So 25,000 Mouzas have been mapped in Punjab. Aruj, if you could simply, describe the process of, how it went, that would be great. I would help you with the slides.
So basically, we can see at the left top, these are basically the Patwar Khanas where we had to go in every district to collect the data. And in the middle top picture, we can see that this is the scale of the maps. So we had like A0 size paper maps that were available, and there were some very large Latha maps that were available. It was very difficult to collect the data from every district and take the data to Lahore and then scan. So for that purpose, a customized vehicle was developed, which we can see at the top. And right at the bottom of that picture, we can see the inside picture of that vehicle. So that vehicle had all the scanners and computers, and there were trained GIS staff who went to every district of Punjab, to Bahawalpur, DG Khan, to the remote districts, and they took the Masawis and the Latha maps and they scanned at that place and then returned back. So it was easier because the paper maps are not in very good quality, and it's not possible that they can be transported to Lahore and then scanning can be done. And at the middle of the picture, there were certain level of surveys that were also conducted of Sehaddas. So Sehaddas are basically the benchmarks that are being used by the Patwaris and the land administration. So there were little field activity that was involved into it, and then collection of the Masawis was done. Once we had collected the Masawis, so generally when we talk about one Mouza, one Masawi map is being prepared by one Patwari. But it has multiple, you can say, jigsaw puzzle type maps. So we had to combine all the maps to develop one map of a Mouza. So this process of this slide is basically the stitching of Masawis, that the Masawis were stitched to produce one complete Mouza map. So this map is a simple map, a simple JPEG. It didn't have the coordinates into it. Once we had prepared the mosaic of Masawis at a village level, then the next process was georeferencing of the Masawis. For that purpose, we had acquired very high resolution satellite image, which was like 30 centimeter of resolution, and it was the georeference image, and the Masawis were synced with the satellite image. So we can...
This is what they did actually. The image, and then over the image, the Masawi. And you can see this is a perfect fit. I mean, we are showing it for presentation purposes, not everything is that 100%. But that is why it took 10 years. So, there was a lot of labor involved, in this thing.
So what's the difference between Latha and Masawi?
So Lathas are bigger maps. Lathas are not that accurate as compared to Masawis, because Masawis are at 100% scale. But we can see the bigger picture on the Latha, and we can use the Masawis according to that.
So Masawi on paper.
Masawis are on paper. Lathas are on paper, cloth.
And so let's move forward. And this was the mapping, and you can see this, how this thing is sort of put together. So all these jigsaw puzzles are then joined up together, and then you have what we call a digital boundary of the Mouza. And it starts with one individual Mouza boundary, it moves to a district, and then you move to the provincial level. Simple as that. This one again, Aruj, I would like, give it to you.
So this is not directly linked with the Mouza dashboard, but that is very interesting because if we talk about Mouzas, it has certain scares which we call as khasra numbers. And these are very important when we have to identify the land ownership of any area or land transfer. So this is the most important component. For Board of Revenue in 3 districts of Punjab, Lodra, Hafsabad and Lahore, we conducted the khasra level mapping. And khasra level mapping is so important that we can see there are khasra numbers which are labeled onto it. So this information is available on Masawi. 3 districts has been done, but this is very HR extensive job. It can take another 10 years because BR is currently doing it to have that khasra level information. Once we have khasra level information, we can auto-locate the state land, we can have the listings of state land and it can be directly linked to it. We can have listing of, for example, the polling stations which are lying within these areas, it can be directly linked. So this is one of the important data, and this was the dashboard that was developed. We can have the measurement because even the line measurements were over there. So if there is any division of the khasra level or the ownership, so we call it that titimma. Titimma is the term that we have broken that khasra and it is divided between 2 brothers or like that. So that information is also available for 3 districts of Punjab.
So you have Lakha, and you have Sawi, and then you have Khasra, and then the
Yeah. Yes.
That's, again, that's, if you really want to go way ahead into the future, I would really think, while it would take another decade or so, if you are able to digitize the khasra, then you can have a khasra level information that who are the owners in this khasra. So even if it is a mushtarka khata, so it's a joint holding, you can at least know who are the owners in the khasra, what is the infrastructure, what is the road. I mean, you can introduce any number of variables, but we have not gone to that level with the exception for 3 districts. And that was some work that then we, left that and decided to actually complete the Musawi map, or to actually complete the Mouza boundary and leave the khasra to a second stage. But just imagine, that if you have digitized khasra level information, it can really transform the thinking at the local level, at the local planning level, at the local intervention level. Even if you have Mouza level digital information, that would be remarkably transformative, because other than that, you just have a tehsil or a district. And our tehsils and districts are big, huge chunks of land. The number of schools or other government infrastructure in a tehsil or a district runs into hundreds. What we really need is a jurisdictional unit in which you have manageable numbers. That's very important, because over there then you can actually do the planning, or when we say that you need to introduce village level government or some type of a local government structure, even if they're interested in doing something, they just don't have the wherewithal. And I think this Mouza dashboard would be a first step towards that type of a planning. So I'm thinking very futuristically over here. So let me move forward with this, because there are, and this is the satellite view of it. This is something that we did, and along with that, we are now also using census block data, because the census organization has finally made available the micro data. So now we are able to, for cities, also able to figure out that what is the population at a census block level. And I think what are we seeing? Is it Lahore? Yeah. So 2017, and this is the population of Lahore. If you want to, if you are doing an urban planning class and you want to see how the city has hollowed out, this is the picture to look at. Up there, right in the middle where you see that depression, that's where the Lower Mall Road area and the old Lahore is, and you see around it, there is higher density, But in the middle, there is actually low density. A lot of it has to do with urban planning codes, etc. But this is typical of a city in which changes are taking place. I would consider this image very seriously. That the center of Lahore is all hollowed out, and perhaps the 2024 election results might actually reflect itself also, in this. So.
Also, that's not the impression one gets.
No.
Go through those areas.
No.
So,
but this is the impression. This is what the numbers are telling you at the census block level. And if you now actually travel along the mall, finally the walled city is doing some facade uplifting of the mall buildings. If you ever get the chance, please do visit the mall. It is really looking amazing. So the Hall Road building where the service and Bata shoe store is, and all those. So this is a case of revitalization of the city center. That how can you revitalize this city center, which is so properly planned? You look at the thoroughfares, the Napier Road, the Temple Road. These are excellent roads. Unlike what you see over here. This is a very ordinary type of a grid formation without any sidewalks, etc. So this we did for Saiwal. This is the district of Saiwal, and the population densities now are at the Mouza level. So you have the census block at the city level, and at the rural level now, because we have Mouzas, we have got Mouza level densities for the district of Saiwal, just as an example. So we are just simply actually playing around with it. So Mouza-wise population census 1998, and let us see census 2017. This and this. And you can see, there is a road going along. You can see that slanting sort of an angle. And just see how things are actually developing along the roadside. This is again very interesting, Pakka houses. So the larger the circle, the greater the percentage of Pakka houses or brick and mortar buildings. But one thing which I really liked was this one, the literacy rate thing. So if you have now Mouza level literacy rates, you can see that on the average, Saiwal may look like above average literate district, but if you look at the Mouzas of Saiwal, not every Mouza is equally literate. And that too, will open up a lens that you've never looked through first, before. Let's move forward. What are the features of this dashboard? Aruj would be obviously, jumping in, but this was made for the Chief Executive Officer particularly, so I don't forget the features. So number one, it is bilingual. You can operate it in English and Urdu, so it was done with the point of view of the administrative field staff at the field level. Some of them perhaps feel much more comfortable with the Urdu language. It has got different spatial data layers, not very many at the moment. You can do also actual measurements. So you can actually draw a polygon and figure out what is the length or the area within that particular polygon. We've got an online mapping tool. You can upload data onto it, so you can actually transpose data onto that Mouza layer. It gives you access to all the digital Musawis. And obviously it has a satellite image layer actually built into it. So far what we have done is we have done the Mouza profile of health and education because that was the data which was easily available. But we are trying to build up these layers, sort of enrich the information at the Mouza level, spatially as much as we can. And it has got a 24/7 access through a web link. The login is, I think, still privileged. So not everybody, has the login. But do we have it all the way to the assistant commissioner level now?
Yes.
Okay. So Aruj, if you could, follow on from here.
So When we go through the dashboard, and this is for the first time in Pakistan that we have the Mouza level information about the health facilities and education facilities at Mouza level. So when we click on any of the Mouza, we'll be demonstrating in the dashboard as well. So it will get all the details that is there any DHQ, THQ, Tehsil headquarter health facilities there. If there are schools, how many schools are female-based schools, and gender-based data is also there. There is data of connectivity, so we can see the graphs that Mouza level health facility detail of that specific Mouza that has been selected, and school level detail is available. So this graph and map and data is available for all the Mouzas across Punjab.
So these are the departments which have already started using. Because this was an ongoing process, people have already started using. So the Board of Revenue, obviously, we are using the assistance or the field support from the Board of Revenue. So the Board of Revenue is obviously using the Mouza level dashboard, but agriculture, irrigation, the housing department, the Election Commission of Pakistan, the Ravi Urban Development Authority, even all the way to the civil aviation, the Pakistan Rangers, and the counter-terrorism department is also using the Mouza level dashboard for transpose your own layer onto it and see what happens with it. And we are, giving access to all departments who ask for it. Basically, I've talked about it in not so many words. It will give us a baseline for spatial planning and land management. It will also preserve our land records. So once you digitize something, we've saved 22,000 Musawis, you can say. I mean, one contribution, one public good that we've done is that so far we've been able to save 22,000 Musawis out of 25,000. The remaining 3,000 are at large, and there is a posse out for it. Perhaps, they will be able to actually get hold of them. But that's not a bad score. So if it's rescue and salvage business, the urban unit has done its service for the province. It will actually give an online availability of data far and wide because we are giving this facility all the way to the assistant commissioner level. So that is about like a couple of hundred officers which have access to it. Mouza level analysis for flood disasters. We will show you an example. Digital Girdavari. This is really interesting because the Board of Revenue is doing its crop mapping or, crop surveys, the annual crop survey, which is known as the Girdavari, through digital means, but they don't, now they have the Mouza layer. Now they can actually tell which Mouza is producing what and what is the yield in a particular Mouza. So that would really sort of, transform agricultural interventions and irrigation interventions. Better planning and decision making. We have already started sort of imparting this training to officials in the field at various levels in different districts and divisions on how to use the dashboard, whosoever has got the login. And Aruj, now I would actually leave it to you. This is an important area. Ali knows more about it. I know very little about it. Demarcation of local areas under Punjab Local Government Act 2019, former Local Government Act 2019.
So basically, when we say that the Mouza boundaries are the base data, so these are the base data for most of the departments when they have to identify and define their jurisdictions. So for example, same data can be used for the boundaries definition for labor department, which we are doing now. So once they define the boundaries, the resources and HR is allocated accordingly. So when we were working with the local government in 2019, so if we look at the top left second image, so it is basically showing the two data layers on the satellite image. Brown one is the contiguous built-up of an urban area in Punjab. So cities are basically the contiguous built-up. Whenever we have to define the city limits, so it is the contiguous built-up of that area. And green, there is a green border line which is not clear here on the projector. It is covering almost 60 to 70% of the urban area. So the problem was that they used to define the urban areas without using technology, so there were not usage of imagery and multiple data sets. So we came up with an idea that the identification or the notification of the local governments shall be on the basis of the data sets. So Mouza boundaries was one of the data layer, because in their act it was written that more than 90% of the time it should not be broken. So we can't divide any Mouzas. But if there is any emergency that only 1% of the Mouza is having settlement, then we can have the khasra numbers out of it. But generally, when we have to define the National Assembly's boundaries, Provincial Assembly's boundaries, Mouza is the entity. So what we do, we combine the Mouzas, merge it, and notify the Mouza names in the form of a notification. So Mouza boundaries were used. Top right map is the map which we acquired from Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. So it was basically a mind map which was not up to the scale, and they used to do census by using that data. So we required the satellite image, Mouza boundaries, and census blocks, because census blocks are in the urban areas, but if we are going to expand the census block, there are certain Mouzas who had to given the designation of urban area. So census blocks were verified into the field with the joint surveys, and census block at the second number at the bottom, we can see that this is the map which has been transformed from that paper map. And then we had defined a boundary by considering the Mouza boundaries, census blocks, and the past expansion of the city. So we also shared the previous 20 years expansion data of cities to the local governments, and there were certain committees which were developed at DC level in each district, and then the local government boundaries were notified properly. So this was the whole process, but the purpose is that Mouzas were one of the basic unit whenever we have to notify any land area.